Senate Democrats threaten government shutdown over DHS funding after Minneapolis shooting. In late January 2026, Democratic leaders in the U.S. Senate dramatically escalated a political fight over federal spending following a fatal shooting in Minneapolis, dramatically raising the risk of a partial government shutdown. The standoff centers on opposition by key Senate Democrats to funding for the Department of Homeland Security, DHS, and its immigration enforcement agencies, particularly Immigration and Customs Enforcement, ICE, and Border Patrol, after another controversial use of force by federal agents. The Minneapolis incident that set off the crisis. On January 24, 2026, federal immigration enforcement agents shot and killed Alex Pritty, a 37-year-old ICU nurse and U.S. citizen, during an aggressive operation in Minneapolis. Federal officials claimed Pritty approached agents with a handgun and resisted orders to disarm, justifying the use of lethal force. But released bystander video and eyewitness accounts contradict parts of that federal account, showing Pritty holding only a phone when agents tackled and shot him. The incident was one of several controversial uses of force by DHS agencies in the city in recent weeks, including an earlier fatal shooting of Renee Good, an unrelated civilian. Pritty's killing sparked immediate shock, protests, and political outrage, reverberating far beyond Minnesota. Critics, including national civil rights organizations and some lawmakers, have called for independent investigations and accountability for DHS and ICE operations. Democrats take a hard line over DHS funding. Reacting to the Minneapolis shooting and broader concerns about federal immigration enforcement tactics, Senate Minority Leader Chuck Schumer announced that Senate Democrats would block a sweeping government spending bill unless the DHS portion, which includes tens of billions in funding for immigration enforcement agencies, is separated or reformed. Schumer called the DHS spending bill woefully inadequate to rein in the abuses of ICE and said Democrats would not provide the votes needed to proceed with the package if DHS funding remained included. The broader spending package before Congress includes funding for about half of the federal government, encompassing major departments such as Defense, Education, Health and Human Services, and DHS. With existing funding set to expire at midnight Friday, January 30, 2026, lawmakers face a hard deadline to either pass the bill or risk a partial government shutdown. Why this fight matters politically. Democrats argue that continuing to fund DHS and its agencies without added oversight or reforms effectively enables ongoing abuses. They want measures to curtail aggressive immigration enforcement tactics, including requiring judicial warrants for interior arrests, better training and accountability mechanisms for agents, and restrictions on the deployment of Border Patrol agents far from the U.S. and Mexico border. Several prominent Democratic senators, including those who previously helped avert shutdowns, expressed deep concern that the current DHS funding bill fails to address these issues. Some Democrats are even calling for impeachment proceedings against DHS leadership, including Secretary Kristi Noem, due to what they say is a pattern of mismanagement and insufficient accountability. Shifting positions and fractures in both parties. A notable aspect of the standoff is how it has reshaped traditional voting patterns. Some moderate Democratic senators who had previously supported federal appropriations measures, even during the historic shutdown late in 2025, now say they cannot support the DHS funding bill as it stands. Senators such as Jackie Rosen and Catherine Cortez Masto publicly said they would refuse to back the legislation absent major changes, a significant break from past priorities. Republicans, who control the Senate with 53 seats, need at least 60 votes to overcome a filibuster and advance the funding bill. Without Democratic support, the bill is effectively stalled. Republican leaders have so far resisted splitting DHS funding from the larger package, complicating efforts to build enough bipartisan momentum to avert a shutdown. Broader political and public reaction. The political fight has spilled into public discourse. Cities across the country saw protests supporting demands for justice and accountability for Pritty and other victims of federal enforcement actions. Large demonstrations were reported not only in Minneapolis but also in cities such as San Francisco, Los Angeles, New York, and Boston. National political figures have weighed in from all sides. Former President Barack Obama and other leaders called the Minneapolis killing a tragedy and urged thorough investigations. Conservative commentators have framed the confrontation as essential for border security and lawful immigration enforcement. What a shutdown would mean. If a partial government shutdown occurs, only programs and agencies with existing funding or statutory exemptions will continue operations. Critical services could slow or cease, affecting agency staffing, federal contractors, and public services tied to parts of the government awaiting new appropriations. The exact scope of disruption depends on how the funding legislation is ultimately structured and whether DHS is decoupled from other federal spending bills before the deadline. Next steps and the path ahead. With lawmakers returning to Washington in late January, the coming days are crucial. Democrats say their demand for accountability and reform is non-negotiable, casting the budget fight as a broader moral and political moment, a test of whether Congress will constrain what some see as unchecked federal power. Republicans argue that abandoning DHS funding risks national security and that negotiations over policy should not imperil government operations. Senate leadership from both parties will need to navigate procedural hurdles, ideological divides, and public pressure in the coming days. Whether a compromise can be reached, such as stripping DHS funding and passing the rest of the appropriations bills, remains a central question as January 30th nears. If you want, I can also prepare a timeline of events, from the Minneapolis shooting to the shutdown risk, or profiles of key lawmakers' positions involved in this dispute.